The New York Yankees are reportedly out on Cody Bellinger. The Cubs have signed Alex Bregman, and the Mets are seen as the favorites to land Freddy Peralta.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. On the show today, got a lot of rumors and news to react to in the first segment. We're going to discuss the Cody Bellinger rumor that apparently the Yankees are out on negotiating with Bellinger anymore after an impasse in those negotiations. What does that mean for Bellinger's market? Are the Mets maybe in line to swoop in and sign him? We'll go through that. In the second segment, we'll talk about Alex Bregman signing with the Cubs. What does this mean for the rest of the free agent market? Then in the final segment, the Mets are seen as a favorite to trade for Freddy Peralta. What would it take to get a deal done? We got some reporting on what the Brewers want. But before we get to any of that, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the #1 daily podcast on the New York Mets. Want to find any of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, so probably the biggest rumor of the day, and I guess it wasn't even a rumor, it was a report that according to Buster Olney of ESPN, the Yankees' negotiations with Cody Bellinger reached an impasse and they are out. Tell me if this does not sound familiar to what we might have heard a year ago with the Mets and Pete Alonso. Here's the story. The Yankees were hoping to re-sign the veteran outfielder who played well for them last season, but are now operating under the assumption that Bellinger is going to sign elsewhere. New York is now seeking additions elsewhere. Sources added. Says the Yankees have offered Bellinger a 5-year deal for at least $30 million per season, sources said, which falls in the range of deals that other star hitters received this winter. They mentioned Pete Alonso and Kyle Schwarber, who are both right around there. Schwarber was 5 years, $150 million, so $30 million per. Of course, with Scott Boras being Pete Alonso's agent, when the Orioles came a knocking after they struck out on Schwarber, it was okay. Give my guy $1 million more per year. And that's what Pete got, 5 years, $155 million. Then it came time for Cody Bellinger, and the Yankees were calling for around 5 for $150. And Boras apparently wants 7 years and more when it comes to average annual value than the $30 million per season he has been offered. So a couple of things that I have to start with here. First and foremost, do I believe that there is now a 0% chance that Cody Bellinger signed to the Yankees? I do not. I actually think that there is just as much of a possibility that Bellinger signs with the Yankees, because if they have reached those lengths of 5 years and $150 million, I don't think there's going to be a team that beats that offer. Cody Bellinger is not a consistent player. He had his best season in a long time since his MVP year in 2019 with the Yankees last year. So it was an absolutely outstanding season for him, a 5-win season, nearly hit 30 home runs. But I think the Yankees know that Cody Bellinger is better on their team than he would be on most, because he is playing in a ballpark that is catered to his swing, where he gets those home runs pull side, and you have that short porch. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the closest he has gotten to 30 home runs in years is his one season in pinstripes. His versatility defensively, any team can obviously use that, but I think the best offensive version of Bellinger probably is in a Yankees uniform. Now, does that mean that he can't be good for the Mets? No, he'd still be a good player, but a $30 million a year player for 7 seasons, the Mets aren't touching that. I don't think any team is going to touch that. And if he wants $35 million per over a 5-year deal, I don't think anyone's going there either. Now, interestingly enough, Scott Boras is also Alex Bregman's agent, and we will talk more about what the Bregman contract means for the rest of the market. But I will note that, sure, Alex Bregman just got $35 million per season, but that came when there was multiple teams that were engaged in the bidding for Alex Bregman. The Red Sox wanted him back. They traded Rafael Devers midseason, and everybody thought, all right, that's money freed up to sign Bregman. They first moved Devers off third base for Alex Bregman, had all that stuff go on behind closed doors, where actually a lot of it ended up leaking out from behind those closed doors with Devers and management and not wanting to move to first base and all that drama. Now he's the Giants' first baseman, and the Red Sox got nothing. Bregman's gone. But the fact that they were engaged in the market and the Cubs were engaged in the market, it led to a bidding war where ultimately Alex Bregman got $175 million, which is a very, very good deal for Bregman when you look at what he did last year, which was sign the 3-year, $120 million deal with the heavy deferrals that came out to, I want to say it was in the $30 million range when it comes to present day value, or a little bit more than that. Now, though, if you just talk about total money he's gotten in his free agent years, eventually he'll get 40 from the Red Sox when the deferrals get paid off. And he just now got another $175 million. So $250 million in the free agent years for Alex Bregman. Got to say, job well done for Scott Boras. And now he's looking to do the same thing with Cody Bellinger. But I don't know if there's going to be two teams that are driving up the bidding for Cody Bellinger, where he's going to get $175 million over 5 years or $210 million over 7 years. I just think they're asking for too much. And unless another team steps up, the Angels, the Dodgers, whoever it is, I think Bellinger is going to have a tough time getting to a contract that's more valuable than what the Yankees offered him. Look, I've been light on a good amount of the deals recently when it comes to my predictions. I had Cody Bellinger signing with the Yankees on a 6-year, $150 million deal at the beginning of the offseason. So I don't think 5 for $150 is a bad deal whatsoever. I think it's a really good deal for Cody Bellinger, and I don't know if that's something the Mets would even do themselves. I think the Mets would probably be more trying to get Cody Bellinger, just like with Kyle Tucker, on the short-term deal at the high AAV. And I think for them, they'd probably think $30 million is a high AAV for Cody Bellinger. So it's interesting, even though I think the gut reaction from Mets fans saying the Yankees are out on Cody Bellinger, your initial read might be, all right, I guess the Mets have a better shot at this. And in some respects, sure, if the Yankees really do close that door and they slam it shut and they lock it. But last year, the Mets were done with Pete Alonso. And we reacted to it, and then we thought about it. We said, you're not done with Pete Alonso. And sure enough, they brought Pete Alonso back. So I would not be surprised at all if at the end of next week, it's announced that Cody Bellinger has signed a 5-year, $150 million deal with the Yankees, or maybe it's 5 for $160, and he got $32 million per. But I still think that one phone call from Boras to the Yankees saying, we actually will reconsider your offer, probably can get a deal done quickly still. So I'm not going to rule out the Yankees for signing Cody Bellinger. And honestly, with what we're now learning about what the Bellinger camp is expecting in terms of contract, it feels less likely that the Mets are going to pay that price. I think David Stearns, while he values the defense, I also think that if you're going to pay a premium amount for a free agent, you better get the best player. And if the ask is that high on Bellinger, to me, it's more likely that we see the Mets try to increase their pursuits of Kyle Tucker rather than meet that price for Bellinger. Because if they're going to pay $40 million a year on a 4-year deal, I don't think they're going to give that to Cody Bellinger. I think they would try to give that to Kyle Tucker. So I think that's where we're at with this whole thing with the Yankees. What would their pivot be? According to Buster Olney, it could be Kyle Tucker or Bo Bichette, but it's just a matter of how far are they willing to go for those players. If they got Bichette, that would be very interesting because that's pulling him from a division rival with the Blue Jays. Also, you would think that the Red Sox might all of a sudden be in on Bo Bichette. So what I want to talk about next here, I want to spend a little more time on the Alex Bregman signing and how this affects the other areas of the market, and in turn, what could this mean for the New York Mets and their free agent pursuit? So we're going to go through all that here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Let's be real. Managing your finances can feel overwhelming between subscriptions you forget about, bills that keep going up, trying to figure out where all your money is going each month. It just can feel like you're losing control. And that's where Rocket Money comes in, because Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you take control. It'll find and cancel unwanted subscriptions. It'll monitor your spending. It'll help you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. The automatic transaction categorization is a game changer. I can finally see exactly where all my money is going each month, so you can more easily set budgets and goals. You can get personalized insights, receive real-time alerts for large transactions, upcoming bills, and low balances. It just consolidates everything into one single dashboard where you can view your entire financial picture in one place. So let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster by joining at rocketmoney.com/locked-on. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. rocketmoney.com/locked-on. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 16,000 subscribers. All right, so let's talk about the deal that actually got finalized on Saturday night. That is Alex Bregman signing a 5-year, $175 million deal with the Chicago Cubs with no opt-outs and a no-trade clause. So this is not a deal to hit the market again. This is Alex Bregman getting the contract that'll take him through potentially the rest of his career, $35 million per no-trade clause, so he can be there in Chicago for the rest of his career if that is what he chooses. Now, the Cubs have had a very interesting week. They traded one of their top prospects in Owen Casey to get Edward Cabrera from the Marlins, and Edward Cabrera in arbitration only made a little over $4 million. So I think these two moves are connected, where they trade for Cabrera, having a cheap starter plug into their rotation, and then instead of having to sign Zach Gallen or Framber Valdez or Ranger Suarez, because they've now gotten their starting pitcher, they go out, they take that money, and they invest it in Alex Bregman. It's interesting because the Cubs had Kyle Tucker and made absolutely no effort in trying to re-sign him. Maybe they just felt like the contract was going to be way more than what they just gave Bregman. Maybe he wasn't a good fit there, or maybe they're really happy to collect the draft pick compensation when he signs with another team. And then they went out and they got a free agent of Bregman who does not have the draft pick compensation attached because he was tendered the qualifying offer last year from the Astros and then signed with the Red Sox. So the Red Sox, they end up with the short end of the stick because they gave up draft picks to get Bregman. They traded Devers, and then Bregman walks. It's rough. And you don't get draft picks for it. So not a good look for the Red Sox at all in this one. And now they're in an interesting place because they got a big bat to replace. What are they going to do? Are they going to just roll with the kids and have Marcelo Meyer play third base? And then who would play second base? I mean, I know they could play Ceddanne Rafaela at second, but it feels pretty foolish to put the best defensive center fielder in baseball and say, yeah, you know what? Why don't you go play second base because you can? I don't think that should be their move. I'm trying to. Fangraphs is just, this is why I get the subscription, so the ads don't get in my way when I'm doing a show here. All right, here we go. Signed in. Let's get to it here. Yeah, they got right now the projection is Romy Gonzalez is their starting second baseman, with Nick Sogard and Nate Eaton, the infielders, on their bench. They also got rid of Vaughn Grisham this offseason. Not that he had done very well as part of the Red Sox organization, but that's another iron in the fire. They have Christian Campbell, who potentially could be their second baseman, so they could stay internal. But I expect the Red Sox to make a move on a bat, but they're not going to overlap with the Mets, I don't think, because their pursuit at this point probably has to be Bichette, right? If you just had a lot of money on the table for Bregman, try to shift those pursuits and put it all towards Bo Bichette, where now Bo Bichette could be the beneficiary because maybe Bo Bichette gets a little Yankees-Red Sox bidding war for his services, and the Blue Jays got to wonder, well, do we have to revisit signing Bichette back because now he's going to go to one of our rivals? So it could be kind of an interesting situation here with Bo Bichette. I think Bo Bichette's going to do very well. He also has the Phillies in on him. So there's a lot of heat right now, I think, on Bo Bichette, which could have less on Kyle Tucker. The Blue Jays still seem to be in on Tucker, maybe more so than even Bichette at this point, because I guess he would fit their team a little bit better if they sign Bichette. They're pushing Ernie Clement to the bench. He can just be their starting second baseman, and he was unbelievable in the playoffs. So maybe this now has the Blue Jays just focused on Tucker, the Yankees, the Phillies, the Red Sox focused on Bichette, and the Mets are now just kind of waiting. You know, they're doing the Dodgers thing. They're hanging around the backboard, as the Dodgers apparently like to do, trying to get a deal done maybe with one of these guys if they fall. I don't think it'd be Bichette. I think it'd be Tucker or Bellinger, but the Dodgers are also probably right around the backboard too for both of those guys. So it's interesting. It's really, if the Yankees move away from the outfield market, and honestly, they absolutely can. I think Bellinger's a good fit for them because of the versatility. They obviously could put Kyle Tucker in the outfield, and they could either trade Jason Dominguez, have Dominguez as a fourth outfielder. There's things that they can still do where it makes sense to add an outfielder. But you look at the Yankees right now, and maybe Bichette is a better positional fit for them. They have Jazz Chisholm, they have Ryan McMahon, but Volpe's going to miss the beginning of the year, so you could have the beginning of the season, Bichette playing short. If you want to, you could just let Bo Bichette play short, do something with Volpe. It's interesting. It's really interesting to see now where Bichette goes and then how that could in turn impact the market for Tucker and Bellinger. Also, you have a guy like Eugenio Suarez who's just hanging out, who theoretically could be an option for the Red Sox. Another thing that's happened over the last couple of days is Ketel Marte was taken off the trade market by the Diamondbacks. Now, though, you add Nico Horner to the trade market because the Cubs, now that they signed Bregman, they have a good young player, Matt Shaw, who also theoretically could be moved. And maybe, you never know. Maybe the Red Sox end up trying to pick up Horner or Shaw, and then these two teams could make a trade. But then what would the Red Sox offer the Cubs to pick up an infielder? It's a very interesting dynamic that this signing with Bregman going to Chicago has on the rest of the market, because I think it kind of puts a lot of stuff in play. So I'll be curious to see what's next. You now have Nico Horner, Brendan Donovan as the two probably more prominent infielders that can still be traded for. Matt Shaw obviously could be moved as well, but there's 5 years of control there. Nico Horner will be a free agent after the upcoming season. He's going to make like $12 million, so the Cubs can shed some payroll by moving him. So I'd expect Horner might be the guy that's moved there. Donovan, again, still out there. The Mets don't really need an infielder. They need an outfielder. But as teams are focused there, maybe the Mets can swoop in on either picking up one of these outfielders or trading for a starting pitcher. And that's the last thing I want to talk about on the show today, because there was another story written about Freddy Peralta from The Athletic. And it just feels like the Mets are the clear-cut favorite to pull off a trade if a trade does happen. So I want to talk about that reporting and where things stand with the Mets potentially picking up Freddy Peralta. We'll close the show there in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better, because every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel is going to give fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame where there's a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern time are now appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour, because you can open up the app and Happy Hour is going to bring us something new each time, new bonuses, new boosts, new surprises. It's easy to check in each week to see the weekly special before tip-off and to add a little bit of energy to your Friday night basketball slate without having to overthink it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Little basketball, little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now it's time to take it up a level. Go ad free Join the Everyday Club today and get Locked On Mets with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonmets.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, so let's talk about this story from The Athletic about Freddy Peralta. Reporting in this is by Will Salmon and Ken Rosenthal. So they're obviously some of the more plugged-in insiders in baseball. And Salmon knows the Mets. He's a Mets insider for them, does a lot of reporting and writing on the Mets. Here is what the story opens up talking about. It says, if the Brewers are going to trade all-star right-hander Freddy Peralta, they ideally will want the return to include a young, major league-ready replacement. Interested teams might resist, knowing they would only get 1 year of club control with Peralta, but any team that acquires him would also gain the inside track on signing him to an extension, the kind that is beyond the Brewers' comfort level. Peralta's agency, Aces, has been open to such deals in the past. Next paragraph, right here at the top of the clubs in the mix for Peralta, the New York Mets might be in the best position to part with a prized young arm, and they can do it without offering top prospect Noel McLean. Two of the Mets' other youngsters, Brandon Sproat and Jonah Tong, reached the majors last season, and Christian Scott, another with major league experience, is nearing the end of his rehabilitation from Tommy John surgery. They continue to mention the Braves with J.R. Ritchie, the Yankees with Carlos Agrong and Elmer Rodriguez, the Red Sox with Peyton Tolley and Connolly Early, the Dodgers with River Ryan, Emmett Sheehan, and Gavin Stoner, among other clubs who had the ability to entice the Brewers, again, assuming they're willing to make this type of move. They go on to kind of say that the Red Sox might be reluctant because they have so many concerns in their rotation that they might not want to give up a young arm. They mentioned that because Peralta's salary is only $8 million, even small market clubs could get in the bidding, although they say it's unlikely a team such as the Miami Marlins would make such a win-now type of trade. So when you read all of that, it does read like all roads can lead to the Mets, because the Mets have the ability to put Brandon Sproat or Jonah Tong on the table and potentially have the best young pitcher on the board that the Brewers are likely going to skew towards. They want a controllable starter. And if the Yankees don't put Legrand on the market, and I think Sproat's probably a better prospect. I know it's just baseball. We have Legrand at like 95 and Sproat, I think, at 93. So it's right there. I mean, but Sproat already reached the majors and had some success. So I think, to me, that would make Sproat a more enticing piece for the Brewers. You know, J.R. Ritchie, maybe a little bit of a better pitching prospect. Peyton Tolley, Connolly Early, probably better than Sproat. Jonah Tong's better than all of these guys, though. So if the Mets put Jonah Tong on the table, I think that would really be kind of an argument ender, but I think the Mets are trying to hold Tong out of this, and I would as well. I think you put Sproat on the table and you say, this is 6 years of a big league starter. We're trading you for 1 year of, yes, an ace, but I really think that's the Mets sort of opener that really does make this a really good conversation between two sides that can line up, and they have the farm system to sweeten that deal to the Brewers' liking to get a trade done. So it's really interesting. And also the note about the extension, I've talked about that plenty this offseason, how Peralta's agency is not Scott Boras. You have a chance to sign to an extension. And as I talked about earlier this offseason, Dylan Cease got $210 million. Deferrals took that, present day value down a little bit. But you're not going to have to pay $210 million when you have a year of control to leverage. Because you can go to Freddy Peralta and say, hey, how's $150 million right now signed? You don't have to throw another pitch. He's going to pitch in the World Baseball Classic. So you don't have to worry about injury risk there. You don't got to worry about anything. Here's $150 million and here's a $10 million signing bonus. You can get a better deal for Peralta than you are going to get with any pitcher on the market next year in free agency, including Peralta, obviously. So there is definitely a lot of reasons to try to make this trade because, for one, it's the best arm you can add this year, as we've talked about already. That's going to help this rotation a ton to have both Peralta and McLean to lead things going into the season. But you also have the ability, if you feel like, man, we're giving up 6 years of Sproat, Well, you can extend Freddy Peralta on a 6-year deal, and now you have the same amount of time with Peralta anyway. So I really do think that this might be the move for the Mets to make this offseason, especially when you pair with an extension. And it's just a matter of what that second piece is beyond Brandon Sproat. Where else are the Brewers going to want to go on in your farm system to complete that deal? Apparently, according to Pat Ragazzo of Sports Illustrated, the Marlins wanted Brett Beatty and A.J. Ewing for Edward Cabrera. The Mets wisely said no way because Brett Beatty is their starting third baseman and A.J. Ewing could be their center fielder of the future. And I do wonder if A.J. Ewing is untouchable right now. Nolan McLean's untouchable. Carson Bench is untouchable. Maybe untouchable is not the right word, but less touchable, right? Like, I think the Mets maybe don't want to trade A.J. Ewing. How do they feel about Jet Williams? Is he in the same boat? Are they trying to keep all of these speedy athletic players? Because that is the mold that David Stearns built the Brewers around, and we see how successful it's been. Maybe they want these speedsters so that they can have some of those guys, in which case Jet Williams, A.J. Ewing, guys that would be perfect pieces for the Brewers as well. Maybe the Mets want to hold those guys tight. Maybe that's where we get again to the power hitting prospects of Ryan Clifford or Jacob Reimer and see if one of those guys entices the Brewers. But also, are the Mets willing to put another top 100 prospect on the table with the Sproat to get a deal done? It's an interesting one. And you still have Trevor McGill hanging around the trade market as well, where you can get a late inning reliever with closing experience to pair with Devin Williams. And those guys have worked together in the past. I just think there's so much crossover with the needs of the Brewers in a Peralta trade and what the Mets can facilitate. And the need for Peralta for the Mets is so immense because regardless of whether they extend him or not, in either circumstance, Peralta makes sense. If he's only making $8 million for the upcoming season and they ride out the contract year, it allows them to invest in other players in free agency. If they decide to extend him, it's going to be cheaper and a better deal than what it would take to sign Framber Valdez. So right now we're in a very interesting part of this offseason where things are starting to happen, movements starting to take place, and I think we're going to have a really interesting next 3 weeks here where a lot of stuff is going to happen league-wide. It might keep going at the current pace that we've had where it's like, all right, a big move, and then we wait 2 to 3 days, and then there's another big move. If that's the case, this can still drag on a little bit and can even drag into February. But I think teams with spring training starting earlier this year due to the World Baseball Classic, I believe all the players who are participating in the WBC have to report by February 9th. So it's truncated here. I mean, we have until that date, you're talking about what? About a little over 4 weeks, like 30 days. So I think we're going to see a lot of action in this upcoming week, and we can see a big move as soon as today, potentially. And obviously, I'll be covering anything that happens Mets related or anything that is major on the market that could shift things, like the deal that happened tonight with Bregman signing with the Cubs. One last little note here before we close out the show today. Luisangel Acuna made a little bit of history on Saturday night, becoming the first player in the history of the Venezuelan Professional Baseball League to hit 4 home runs in a single game. I believe it was a playoff game too. So pretty impressive for Acuna to have a 4 home run game. The Venezuelan Professional League is not nearly as strong of a league as the Dominican Winter League. The play is just a little bit worse. But I will note here, in a league that granted does not have as good of pitching, in 39 regular season games in the Winter League, Acuna hit 8 home runs. He had a 939 OPS. Kind of cool that this guy's performing the way he is, because who knows? Maybe when you're talking to the Brewers about Peralta, they might float Acuna's name as another piece that can go the other way. Can I interest you in Brandon Sproat with Acuna and Ronnie Mauricio, please? Would you take that deal? Who knows? Who knows exactly where those trade discussions will go, but we'll be covering all of it on the show. I appreciate all of you for tuning in to Locked On Mets today and every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And for your second listen, I mean, I got to imagine you got a little Locked On Cubs action with Alex Bregman signing. So I'm sure you could check something out on that for your second listen today.